the Sharks calls here on Thursday with the guys when my work schedule allows. Looking
Nice.
forward to hearing from you today.
Nice to meet you, Tim. Be good to Zach McEwen down there. He's doing the best to hold that team up.
Yeah.
He's a spud. He's from where I'm from. I used to coach him, and I dealt with an injury now.
Peter, could you introduce yourself to Allan, a bit of your background, where you've been all your days, where you are now, and what you're doing now? Go ahead, Peter.
Allan, good morning. Nice to meet you, sir.
Yes, nice to meet you.
I'm in Connecticut, in the States here, and I've coached youth hockey. I've coached girls high school hockey, prep school for many years. Scouted for the USHL, coached club hockey with men, just retired from coaching at Post University, which is an NCAA Division II program, and do a lot of stuff with USA Hockey in the past with the coaching education program. And I think we might have some mutual acquaintances. There's a Doug Shepard.
Yeah, Doug used to work with us, and
Yep.
And what prep school did you work at?
I coached at the Gunnery School for 11 years.
Oh yeah, no, Josh went to Lawrence. My son went to Lawrenceville, and he used to play against them.
Yeah. And then another gentleman who I've always enjoyed when he was at Kent for a bit was Paul Brown.
Yeah, Brown. He's a good old friend of mine. He's a Canadian, and is down there now. I communicate with him quite often.
Hoping he's down in Florida right now.
I don't know. He usually comes up to scout our showcase, and I've known him for years. Though we sent a bunch of kids to him to play for him, and they're doing well. No.
Yeah, I've been to your showcase. That bridge is pretty impressive.
Oh, you've been here?
Yeah.
Oh, great. I probably met you then.
Yeah,
Al, did you say you're?
Yeah, it's a kind of a small fraternity, I find.
Yeah, right.
Al, did you say your son went to Lawrenceville?
Yeah, he went to Lawrenceville.
Yeah, that's just a few miles away. Where we live in Pennsylvania is right on the Delaware River, and I know the rink manager there at the school, and anyway, that's real close by.
Allan, who was
2003, I think you graduated.
Who was coaching then?
Boy, name. He's not coaching now.
Okay.
St. George's, Quebec. I just can't.
Yeah. No, I can look it up. That's a great thing with the world of Google.
Yeah. Etienne Bilodeau.
Yes. Okay. Yes. Yeah. Our paths crossed.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a small world.
Well, listen, people are going to join off and on, I'm sure. There's a number of regulars that aren't on yet. Get on shortly. So, Al, when they do get on, I might interrupt them, have them introduce themselves. And I'm pretty sure most of the people, at least the guys in Canada, the Sharks that you've had coffee with here in Calgary, know you. And you've been on our Sharks calls, I think, before both Tim and Peter have been on. So they know you and know what you're doing. But I think it's just good to have a bit of an update. I'm recording now, and I want to, Al, if you would, in terms of introducing yourself, your experience through Andrews Hockey Growth in Prince Edward Island, a program that's existed for over 40 years, is phenomenal. I wonder if you can talk about the company that Josh now is taking over, and the people that are coming on. You will know them; they know you. So, but for the sake of Tim and Peter and anybody else that's joining, and they all seem to be getting on now, Al, just introduce yourself, talk a bit about your company, and then I'll intervene with questions periodically. We had a great chat last night, Al. And I recorded it. I'm recording this one because gentlemen on here that Al and I are probably the two oldest guys on. Tom Malloy is a close third, I think.
Tom's not that old.
No, he's a young in spirit, but
he's royalty.
it's very important because what Al's been doing for 40 years, we aren't doing it yet. And I'm not just talking ethical coaching. I'm talking teaching fundamentals. So Al, talk a bit about Andrews hockey growth, where it's at now, how it got started, a bit about yourself, if you wouldn't mind. Okay.
Well, I've been coaching in 1961, and I had a few jobs before that, but I got fired from them because I'm glad, because when I started working with young people, I realized that's where I should be, and after 60 years, I haven't got fired yet. So that's a plus. But I was a teacher. I worked with the Department of Education, Youth and Recreation, and I was on a number of committees, and so I've got a practical education. I was brought up on a farm and left home when I was 16, and so I understood how to survive. And when I began, I didn't know much, and now after 60 years, I'm old enough to know I don't know very much. Even though I've learned a lot, I still don't know a whole lot. So I'm not an expert in anything. But what happened with the hockey school, like a number of years, and coached a lot of I coached a lot of guys like Bob Stewart and who played in St. Louis there in 10 years, and then I wanted to do something else, so I took I thought I'd start a skating program, because even though I was coaching, I didn't know a lot of the intricacies of skating. So I some time off and met with some of the top researchers. Most of the skating research was done, or a lot of it, in the late 70s. And so I met people like Dr. Marcotte at Laval University in Quebec, who was a wonderful guy who became a mentor to me. And I followed the work of Dr. Wayne Marino, Dr. Larry Holt at Dal, who worked with Pierre Paget and those people. And they did a lot of, so I started a lot of, some intricacies, and I started a skating program. And short of start a hockey school, I just wanted to research. Was 30 kids for 3 years, and ended up the second year had another group, so they were there for 2 years, and the people started seeing an interest, a real improvement in the kids that went, and self advertised, and it started to become a hockey school. And I offered it to the provincial body, Hockey PEI, but they didn't want it. They didn't see fit to take it. So anyway, we did it anyway, and now we'll work with 2,000 kids in the summer, and it's from all over the world, and we have a great spring program, and I've sort of developed a certain approach to develop young people. So that sort of related to what I did with participation, youth and recreation.
Yeah, you talk about the youth and recreation, and I've gotten to know Al when I was at Hockey Canada with the women's team in the Team Canada. I got to know Al years ago. I was asked by the Canadian Amateur Hockey Association to do a skating clinic. And, I wasn't an expert, but having a phys ed degree and taking all those certification courses from our day, I was about as good as you could get in Canada, because nobody had really privatized skill development at that time. I was looking for some information. I came upon a VHS produced by Al. He said it was in 1986. And it was a short video, 3 elements: forward stride, backward stride, and crossovers. When I did the presentation to high performance coaches, the simplicity and the teaching elements that are required to get a right start. And that I paid tribute to it. Al got back to me with a thank you. And ever since then, we've stayed in close touch with each other. And because of Kathy Campbell, who went to his school, as did a lot of other famous people that you all know, Sidney Crosby, Nathan McKinnon, they all went there as kids and learned how to do things properly from the get-go. I got to know Al really well, have been out a few times to attend his camps and his just to see the big picture of things, and it's amazing. The arenas are filled for the 8 weeks of the summer. He runs programs all year, and it may be more impressive than his hockey work, which is still, bar none, fundamentally the soundest in the world. He does leadership work with young people that we haven't even thought about, and old people are trying to do it. Got kids under 9 doing things that we haven't imagined, and I'm sure we're going to get to talk about that. But isn't this now your son, and I know Brad McKenzie working for you, who's been on our Sharks, have taken it over. The business appears to be as strong as ever and growing, and you, like me, are just trying to stay in the game and make a difference. So I'm going to ask you a question, Al. You did some things, and we all did things in our lifetime that sort of affected us personally. And one of the things you'd mentioned to me is you got involved in some pretty good programs. One of them was a peer teaching program you created.
Well, Wally, when I was with the Department of Education, my job was youth work, youth development, and leadership training, and all those kinds of things. And I went to Texas. They developed a program down there, a peer education program. It was on alcohol and drugs, but the concepts were different. And the guy that did his thesis on it came up with the results that more learning takes place in the peer model and in the lecture technique. So I asked my deputy minister if I could go, and he didn't pay my way, but he gave me a couple of days off, and I played the guitar. So I led to sing songs at this youth rally, and then met with the people that developed that program and brought it to our province and integrated it in the school system. It went also in Nova Scotia, and it was in the school system for 30 years, where the senior high school students taught modules to junior high level, and on decision training and values clarification and all those kinds of things that kids don't get in the school system. Didn't then and still don't. So in many cases. So they replaced it after 30 years with a program on bullying, but I think they should have kept it in, but I'm out of that picture anyway. So when I developed our hockey school, I used that method. We have demonstrators who come through our program, and they're from 8 to 12 or 13, and they demonstrate and they learn to teach very young, and they move on to junior instructors and senior instructors and counselor instructors, and many of them are coaching all over the world now because of our off-ice program, because we have a two-pronged approach, off-ice training and on-ice training. And I'd like to maybe mention some what we do off-ice. We have a reading program, and we have a classroom with quotes from kids, and I'll read a couple of those to you. We teach them to dream, and we teach them to dream big, because it doesn't cost any more to dream big than dream small. And we teach them to have a dream after the dream. So when they reach their first dream, all the things they've learned on the way up are pertinent to life after, mostly hockey. Kids will say NHL, or girls will say national team or Olympic team and all that stuff. So we teach them all kinds of stuff that'll help them get there. Because as Dennis Waitley, I think it was Dennis Waitley that said, you can't travel without first traveling within. And so if they know it on the inside, they can learn it on the outside. But to put them on the ice and have not know what they're doing and the reason for it, and all those things can be pretty frustrating for the people as coaches and teachers and all those kinds of things. So the reading program is amazing. Like we start them at novice, and the novice ones would be something like Make Your Bed, which is the important thing, and parents can work with them on that. Like it's a very small book by a Navy SEAL that talks about getting started every day on the right note and achieving something.
Can you hold that book up, Al, so people can see it? The title?
Just a sec here. Where is it?
Last night, Al and I, he held so many of these books up. Now, I want to make sure everybody understands these are books for kids to read and learn from that he implements in his programs at the U9 level.
This is Make Your Bed by
Move it a little more to your right now. There, good. Perfect. A little bit forward, and that'll be the perfect place to make your bed. Okay, and the Navy SEAL wrote that one.
Yes, it's Admiral William McCraven, and it's easy to read. I think there's 10 chapters, and it gives all the benefits of that. And they're not novices. A lot of them can read it, but they can read parents, get a little help. And the other we have for them is The 7 Habits of Happy Kids by Stephen Covey.
Al, we've lost your image. I can see your beautiful front window.
Well, just a minute now. I'll have to tell this fellow he's trying to get me. Hang on. Okay. Am I back now?
You are now. Yeah, hold that one a little bit closer. There. That's good. 7 Habits, Happy Kids. Good.
Yeah. And so there's a number of them, like Dr. Seuss, All the Places You Go. That's a wonderful book. And things like Have You Filled Your Bucket Today? And a lot of kids, we train them to raise their own money, not to depend on their parents. And we train them really young. And this is a great book for that. It's called the new Totally Awesome Business Book for Kids, and there's all kinds of ideas in there on how to have little businesses and start businesses, and we've had great results of that. Kids have made enough money to pay their own ways in our programs, and given what's left over to people and all those kinds of things. So we try to train them from the inside out. And as we get up higher, we look at things like Talent is Never Enough by Dr. Maxwell, John Maxwell. It's a wonderful book. It's probably the best book that I've ever seen for helping kids. And just a sec here, the chapters are like, and I'll read you a couple of results from what the kids got out of it. But just a sec here.
Just while Al's looking at that, he sent me summaries. Kids will read a chapter and have to summarize it. And Al shared some summaries by 9 and 10-year-old kids that blew me away. And this was a few years ago that he's been doing it. He's been doing it for a number of years. So I think
you want me to
generation of coaches and today's kids are so much smarter than we realize. And Al has probably tapped into that potential better than anybody. Now, Al, before you go on, Tom Malloy's got his hands up.
Tom
wants to say hello, but go ahead, Tom.
Hey, Tom.
Hi, Al.
Tom, look,
you're
an amazing person, and I don't know of anybody else that works like you and in your way and we benefit from it down here in Atlantic Canada, because a lot of people are following. You get the benefit of your work. So I appreciate you.
That's good to hear. It's good to see you. Listen, my daughter's car is frozen, and she's in this program that she has to go to. So it's about a half-hour drive. So I'll try to listen on my phone in the car. My phone went dead on me here. Okay,
well,
so
it's so nice to even see you, Tom. I've learned a lot from you.
Well, it's great seeing you. Also, I think I'll be able to pick it up on my phone in the car.
Oh, if you don't, worry about it.
I'll record it. You'll get it, Tom. So, okay.
Okay, so You guys take care.
So just give me a minute there, Wally. I want to read a few of those things now. Just like the Talent is Never Enough book has a bunch of chapters like belief lifts your talent, passion that energize your talent, initiative activate your talent. So all those good things that we want in our children are covered. And one kid, he was 10 years old at the time, because we usually use that in our Adam program. He said he looked at he wrote on this chapter, he said, developing talent without developing character is a dead end. Character is a sum total of all your everyday choices. If you want your talent to take you far, you need to protect your integrity. All the skills in the world won't help someone whose character is hopelessly flawed. Character protects your talent and guards you from regrets. And that's a 10-year-old. And those are John Maxwell's words, but and that was a summation of the chapter. And the other kids is there's a couple here that I read this morning. I have a bunch of them, but it said in chapter 10 of Talent is Never Enough, Maxwell talks about character and how character protects your talent from overcoming you. Maxwell also states that talented people usually take shortcuts, and character makes that prevents them from happening. And that character gives us a sense of identity, and just another person. But I'll read one more. If you cut corners, this is the biggest threat to your talents. If your character and morals are good, this will protect you. Knowing the difference between right and wrong leads you in the right direction. Don't hang around with the wrong guys. Don't drink or do drugs. And there's one here. This guy's playing with Saint FX now. In this chapter, I learned that if you put things off, you might never get them done. And you should always do things today, because you don't know about tomorrow. My long-term goal is playing the NHL. Before I can do that, I have to focus on today, focus on my education, practicing hockey, and doing my best for the hockey team. So today I made sure I went to school, got my homework done, and now I'm focusing on the big game tonight against Tignish. I'm going to try to focus on today, because that will help me get to where I want to be in the future. So those are the kinds of evaluation reports the kids, after each chapter, they're required to send that in to. We usually pick a teacher on the team who collates them. So the personal development is so important, because when they're on the ice, if they don't understand what they're doing, then they're not. It's going to be frustrating for everybody.
Al, the leadership is a strong part, but another technique you've used, and for everybody here, I think I've mentioned before, he has those young people Google words like triangulation.
Yeah, I'll cover that when I get on the ice, Wally. I'm just going to the ice pretty soon.
Go ahead, Al, talk about that.
Well, when I take a novice team, I'm trying to educate them. And first of all, the kids usually know what they're going to do before they get there. They're not going to go on the ice and have me stand around and wasting time talking to them, because the breaks, they're going to we don't use lines. We keep them going. We have drills that go all the time. And it also, the program also works with what we're trying to teach them. For instance, in the novice, I asked them, and I can ask this off the ice. One time I told a bunch of novices, and they were 7 years old, or 7 and 8, what we were going to teach and stuff. And one little guy said, "What are we building here anyway?" And he got it. So anyway, I give them a word like triangulation. And what's that mean? They go home and Google it, come back tomorrow and tell me what it means. So they go home and they talk to their parents, or they get on whatever, and they figure it out and come back and they talk about, okay, it means in triangles. And so how do you think that relates to our game? And the smart kids get it, and the rest of them listen to their, and they're teaching each other. And so they understand what it is. And then we have drills that show triangulation and how it fits in the game, or what's rotation. Well, that's a big word. and they go home. I said, they Google it and come back, and they said, changing places. They understand that. Now they start to understand concepts, which their brain is, somebody said, well, don't teach that till they're 16. Kids at 7 years old know more than kids at 15 years old, like 50 years ago. And they're ready to learn that stuff. They're so good on computers and everything. So, and then I think and sync. What's that mean? Well, they're not sure. I said, sync, what do you think it means? And they come up with, well, they go home and Google it or talk to their parents, and it's synchronization. It means working together. I said, exactly. So you're thinking together and you're working together. So now they know 3 concepts that we can build and have all of our on ice activities coordinate with that. Now they're thinking, they understand what they're doing, and they got an idea of how that works. I'm going to have to just tell this online. I'll call him back. Sec.
Dan, Al's been talking, and when you come on, Dan, I'm going to ask you to introduce yourself to Al, but the stuff he's talking about, it's a big reason I wanted him on, is he's doing things we should be doing sooner than later. He's been doing it for a long time. So, Al, before you get back on, I hope we remember the train of thought. I want to introduce Dan Arell. Dan, would you introduce yourself, please, to the Sharks and to Al Andrews?
Sure, I'd be happy to. In here, I have a second. I can come off camera here if I can remember how. There we go. Dropping my son off at school this morning, so.
How you
But things are good. But I've been very busy. But this call happens during school drop-off, so it's always a little tricky for me to make it work. But I saw this subject and it said, I'm getting on this one. So yeah, it was nice to meet anyone I haven't met. Nice to see everybody else. My name's Dan Arell. I'm a youth hockey coach here in San Diego, California. So a hotbed of ice hockey. And I write for the coaches site. And so I do a lot of coach education out here. That's one of the main roles I play with the Oilers program that I coach with, is I help with onboarding our new coaches, but also keeping our more veteran coaches up to date on the changes and what's happening in hockey, so they don't get too stuck in their ways. And, you know, we still have a little resistance to ADM at some levels. And so we bring that in and make sure they really see those benefits. Not to get too long, but I actually helped take over a high school coaching practice the other day and brought in stations, and every kid came off and said that was the best practice we've had all year. And now the coaches bring in stations regularly. That's like so much ice being used now rather than being wasted waiting in line. And yeah, so that's what I'm doing out here, and always trying to absorb from everyone I can and bring back more knowledge.
Yeah, well, congratulations on what you're doing, and I really appreciate that. I think that thing I probably should have started with is caring for kids or caring for the people you're working with is a building plank of, well, caring is a building plank of any success program. And if you don't care for people, it's probably better to do something else, because I just read a quote here by an industrialist, Charles Schwab. It says, I've yet to find a man, however exalted in his station, who did not do better work and put forth a greater effort under a spirit of approval than under a spirit of criticism. And there's so much of that going on, like people criticizing young people, and you know, effort is what you praise, and you can find something good to say about them. But when you like them, they know that, and they'll, because young people and after 60 years working with young people, you know, I know for sure that they will rise to the level of the expectations of the people they admire. And if you can develop that relationship with them and really realize they're people, and I don't look down on kids. I look up to them, because I've learned probably a large percentage of what I know from them, and over the years of teaching and working with youth and all the other things that I got involved in. So that's important, and that's that's a building plank of being successful in anything, but caring for people. And I get all kinds of feedback on a kid will send me something. I had a call from a boy I coached phys ed, or yeah, I worked with a phys ed teacher 58 years ago, and he thanked me out of the blue. I get this call, and I get a lot of that, but mostly it's because I just am nice to people. I don't, and people will go to you when they know that you care about them, and I'm no big hero. It's just that I like doing what I'm doing, and I get pretty excited when I'm working with young people, and the people that we work with, and some are large, they're in professional hockey and playing NHL. Some are doctors and lawyers, and over our program, this particular hockey program was started in 1979. And of course, we've had a lot of alumni, and they bring their kids now. Second generation are bringing their kids, and I'm sure in some cases third generation, but they come for the hockey, but they also come for what they learn off the ice, and that's a part that's not always included in a coaching program.
Al, I want Kim McCullough to introduce herself.
Oh, I know.
I have to admit, of our entire group, and I think you might know Kim.
Oh, I do.
She's really polite. She doesn't embarrass us, but she is the brightest shark of all. So, Kim, I'm not sure how well you know Al and what he's doing, but Al, Kim's doing things. Kim, I passed on your email yesterday to all the girls hockey administration, who have passed it on to all the coaches yesterday. But you're doing great work. So go ahead, Kim, introduce yourself, and Al will get back on his topics again. Go ahead, Kim.
She doesn't have to introduce herself. We know each other, and I admire Kim for what she's doing. And she took the bull by the horns and went and did what she thought was right, and she's been very, very successful in what she's doing. And talking to Kim, you can't help but learn. How are you doing, Kim?
I'm doing great, Allan. How are you?
Every day is a gift, isn't it?
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, I appreciate the opportunity to chat. Yeah, it's always I don't want to take up any airtime, Wally, because I want to listen to Allan. I think I always want to grow and get bigger, and I think a lot of what he does is maybe a direction that my business or my company could go in the future, in terms of expanding. But thanks for passing on that email, Wally. I had Sam told me she passed it all to all the Calgary coaches. I sent out an email yesterday about how to score more goals in girls hockey, which I think I sent it out to about 5,000 people, and I think it got opened about 3,000 times already. So it's a pretty popular topic in girls hockey. But always happy to share, always happy to learn. Yeah, I won't take up any more of the precious airtime we get here with Allan.
Well, my son went to the Välimäki Institute in Finland, and he did his thesis on goal scoring. And at the time, it was a bit of a breakthrough, and a lot of repetition now when other people are doing the same thing. But so it's a very important, and there's a lot of things involved there. And believe it or not, stick length is one of them. And because if your stick is too long, then you're not able to, you're not to operate in small spaces, and everything is small spaces right now because there's no room. Everything's so fast, and puck has to move so fast. But anyway, those are things. I guess that's a topic we could talk about later. But the Hall of Famers all have a shorter stick than the ones that aren't, and of course some are longer because their arms are shorter. But it's all alignment is so important in skating. But anyway, those. I don't know if I can get you a copy of that or not, Kim. I don't know if it's still in circulation. That was quite a few years ago. But anyway, it's a great topic because it's harder to score now, but the good ones are finding a way to do it, and so there's always something new to learn. And anyway, I'm not sure where I should go from here, Wally.
Well, the leadership stuff is goes, we could go forever on the leadership stuff, but Kim, with you on, the technical stuff is really intriguing. And you did some things on shooting. I grew up in the day of shooting where it was load up, back foot, transfer weight, power shooting, and accuracy was determined by pointing the blade. And now it's shooting off the front foot and quick release. And that's something we're teaching young people now, and watching Tom's U13 skaters. Cassie has done that with them, and they are doing, and this is U13, no dust shooting, no dust passing. Their pass ratio is probably 4-to-1 in terms of the opposition completed. So the skill level that's happening at that age, and it's amazing. But that's your area, Al. And
Well, I'd like to. I think I can get to that, but there's a way that, like I had, the brain has to be trained. Like the brain has to be trained through proper repetition, because in the game, you don't have time to think about what you're going to do with the puck, and it has to be automatic because the game is so fast. You can't say well, who's open and all that kind of stuff. You got to move quick, and so training the brain is so important. And I had a line mate when I played at UNB, and his son. He's in Montreal now. He's a Maritime, but his son is Lucas Medill, who's a mental performance coach for Team Canada. And Herb and I were on when the Canadian juniors were playing. We were watching, of course. We were talking back and forth, and Connor Bedard was the topic, and so Lucas had a week with him in Halifax, or 10 days, whatever. And he called his father and said, "Don't worry about." We were kind of concerned about his weight and his strength and all that. He said, "Don't worry about Connor Bernard." He said, "His arms and legs don't even look real. They're so muscled." And he said, I asked him, I said, "Connor, how many pucks do you shoot a day?" And he said, "I don't count pucks. I count buckets." He said, hundreds. And he didn't get his shot from playing video games. And that's the important thing. He's trained his brain that he can shoot so quick. And that's really relevant to goal scoring. I was on a advisory committee on fitness and amateur sport for the National Fitness and Sport for the federal sport minister Otto Jelnik a few years ago. It was quite a few years ago now. And Sylvie Bernier was on that. And she was an Olympic high diver, and she would do 100 mental perfect dives in her mind sitting at the foot of the high dive board before she did one. And Sylvie Bernier or Susan Natras, she's I think a skeet shooter, Olympic skeet shooter, and we had a boy that I worked with for a number of years. He could have been a pro, but he decided to go another direction. But when he was, I tell the kids, if you got to learn to pass the puck. And I say, where do you pass it? Do you pass, if you're shooting a duck, do you pass where he was, where he is, or where he's going? And they figured out, well, where he's going. So this father took his son skeet shooting. That it was in our program for 3 or 4 years at this time, and he never had a gun in his hand before, and he hit 3 out of 4 of the first clay pigeons. And his father said the only thing he could figure out was because he was trained to pass the puck that way. And so when the brain gets trained, things happen automatically. And that is that relates totally to goal scoring. And so I think those are things that we have to include in our training programs and our practices. And the other thing, before I forget it, when you're running a practice, like so many times, Hockey Canada coaches and whatever, you go to a rink and you'll see 10 kids standing in line, and so they're getting 1/10 of the ice time they could get if everything was going well, and so they need to make maximum use of the ice time. And the other thing that kills the practice is a coach talking to them. So we have the kids know what they're doing before they go on the ice. They they have drills that relate to, well, like we talked about triangulation and rotation. All those drills are suited to where they are in their development, and also so if they need a break, and sometimes they don't get very many, but it should be short. And what I use it for is, I use it for philosophy, talking good things into their lives, like, the right who to get around with, all anything that comes into my mind. Just a quick little talk on that, but not very long. And so they get maximum use of their ice time. And the other thing is, they need to know what they're doing and why they're doing it. And so then we move into, after we do that for so long, the kids take over the practice. They'll teach the drill, have somebody demonstrate it maybe in skating, because we always do like half-hour skating in every practice, but we try to get an hour and a half, because that seems to be what is the best way to use ice time. And they get the chance to teach. And so all of the things they do in the classroom, they get up and talk. They present to each other, and there's always positive reinforcement. And as a result, we're getting a lot of coaches that are graduates. Like Devin Pratt spent years with us. He's a Swift Current there, and he was with the National Under-18 program. I think they won gold. And he's a future. But we have kids coaching or grads coaching in Europe and universities and all over the place, and who spent years with us, and by learning and teaching themselves, and taking part in their own development, and self-educating themselves, and by watching the NHL, what they do right, what they don't do right. And what they don't do right a lot of the time is not know how to play a one-on-one, which makes Connor McDavid look really good, because when they cross over, when he's close, they're in his rearview mirror. But they've got to learn proper turns, and that's part of our skating program, and not to cross over, to use backward striding for lateral movement, to open up when you turn, and so you can recover if there's a cutback and those kinds of things. So, I'm rambling there, but
it's happening. People will put their hands up with questions, and you take it away from there. We're getting her going. Peter, you're up.
Yeah, Al, my question was, you mentioned how when the kids get on the ice that they already know what they're doing, and then you talked about definition of terms and that. When do you give them more or less that assignment that, okay, figure out what triangle means, or whatever that the term may be? When is that actually given to them to do?
Novice, 7 and 8 year olds.
But what about, I guess what I'm getting at is that something where they're on the ice and you say at the end of a practice, hey, I want you all to figure out what triangle means and let me know tomorrow? Like when is it actually given to the kids if they're just always going on the ice?
Well, it could be in the classroom, because we always have classrooms, like, as much as possible, and it's an interactive classroom where coaches and kids take part in it, and they don't feel threatened, because there's always a positive reinforcement from it. And they say something and it may be not totally correct. We say, well, thank you for that. Does anybody else have an idea?
And is that something that happens at your school that you do, or is that something that, in terms of a youth program, that's part of a daily practice kind of thing?
Well, it's in our youth program. In the summer, we used to have about 2,700 kids. It's one location. It's probably one of the largest location hockey schools in the world, and they come from Europe, and a lot of Asians and those people. But I think this summer we're limited to 2,000, and it'll be sold out pretty soon. And so we usually have 75 staff in working that week, and most of them are graduates. So we have a consistent way of delivering the program. But we give that when they're novice, and kids are so smart now. They understand that they're not challenged in our school system. They're not challenged, and they love it. They love it, and they love the positive reinforcement. They love the fact that they're included. They feel part of it, and so we have, and we only have on PEI, we only have uh, like 160 or 70,000 people. It's grown a little bit, but we've had from our spring program, which is about 25 or 6 years old, we've had 20 that either been drafted or played in the NHL. In the summer program, we've had over 50 now, I think, that have either played or developed or been drafted at the NHL. The drafted kids could have made it too, but they didn't have the dream. So.
Al, I'd like to interrupt you because Peter's question, yours is a perfect world. Your school, your programs, and your spring hockey teams are catalysts for doing things the right way. Dan out there in his minor hockey system, Kim running it in Leaside, Peter, you've got volunteer coaches who are going to coach these teams in leagues and have to play games. And the expertise is one thing, the time is another. That's the biggest challenge facing youth hockey coaches today. We have to educate them. I think that's the point. And Peter, I think coming up with ideas as mentors to give to coaches where they ask kids to read an article and send it to them and send it back to a coach. Tim, I think that's something you could do with your minor hockey team, but we have to help coaches out there that aren't in the program, and we have to learn from the program that Al's running in every way. The fundamental teaching, which is not as good as it could be, and the ethical side of thing, developing leadership, character, trust, and respect. Peter, go ahead.
Yeah, and just to kind of piggyback on that, well, because I've done not at all to the extent that Al's done it, and this is great. I've given like assignments to teams, tell me what leadership is, write me a paragraph of what leadership is, or who you think is a leader in your life. It could be a parent, it could be a sports hero, or whatever it might be. But why? So giving them those assignments away from the rink, because like you're saying, the issue you face with youth hockey is you've got kids overscheduled, practices at 6, the parents are getting them there at 10 of 6, they're throwing their stuff on, and they're just getting on the ice. And then after that, they're just getting out of the rink because mom or dad have to go pick up the other sibling at a music lesson. So giving them something to take home has been helpful. But I just love it. I just love Al's idea. I wish there was more of that here, because summer seemed to be taken up by organizations that have their own. If you're part of a AAA team, you do what they do all summer. You don't get the opportunity to do the kind of thing that Al is talking about. Like that traditional hockey school is kind of on the wane here.
Yeah, I think I think I mentioned earlier, maybe it was just a Wally last night, but nobody can succeed on what they're doing or improve on what they're doing unless they have a personal development program, because what you're doing like improves basically with your own personal growth. It'll never outgrow your own personal growth. So I think it's important that you have your coaches read books like Dr. John Maxwell's Talent is Never Enough, and I've one here, Failing Forward. Kids have to know it's okay to fail, because failure is not final. It's only an event, and it's a stepping stone. Really, you can use it as a positive thing. But all those things have to be taught. But your coaches have to be educated, and it's hard for someone that's running a program to do that. And I don't know any answer for that unless you. In our case, we have like all of our many of our graduates are coaching, but they've had like 20 years with us, and listening to people like Bruce Beaton and Wally Kosak, Dr. Joan Vickers, reading their products and stuff. So
Al, here's my before we go to Kim, the solution is in coach education, which is controlled by the governing body. And I believe, Peter, whether it's Hockey USA or Hockey Canada, leadership/ethical coaching modules have to replace the technical ones, because the technical ones that are on now are great. They give you activity, small area games and repetitions like Al mentioned, and that's all the coaches are capable of delivering on. They aren't able to teach, and we wouldn't expect them to. So in the future, if the governing bodies build the ethical modules related to what Al's doing, part of being important, it's more important than the X's and O's. So Kim, go ahead, and then Tom, I think, had his hand up later.
The new hospital, is that where it is?
Hi, guys. So I just had a couple ideas, Peter, not necessarily just thinking about small things that make a big difference. Like for coaches who, like you said, are hockey people kind of running in and out. Allan, I'm coaching my 6-year-old on U9B, so it's our lowest level rep team. Everyone else on the team, it's 8. She's a little tall kid, so it works out. But it's really reinvigorated my love of coaching because, you know, other than teaching them offside, there's not a lot of tactical stuff that we really have to focus on. But I've been using a couple different things with them that I thought would have only been suited for when I've coached higher levels. In terms of the passion, igniting the fire, keeping the fire, burning the fire. And with the girls at that age group, they're not watching a lot of hockey. So I completely agree, Wally. The mission statement, the values, this is the way we do this. This is the Wildcat way of being and playing. That's like the easiest sell for an 8-year-old girl. You tell her once, she's like, yes, I'm doing it. Thank you. She'll tell her parents, this is how we do it. You know, it's a very low hanging fruit. I can't speak to how that would be with a group of 8-year-old boys. So the mission and all of that is like, culture is instant because they've never been on a competitive hockey team. So they just love all of it. They're bought in. So I don't know what to show you first. Allan will like this. I think Al Ramsey gave me this idea. I think you guys have seen this, my magnetic board. Al has one of these. So I bring this in the room for every practice and every game.
Why this won't go on?
And so, you know, I'll show them plays and how to move around, but they can come up and actually do it. So instead of having the marker and having to erase it, I find that's hard. This has really been pretty revolutionary for our team. And it'll just be in the corner of the room. There'll be 2 girls messing around, you know, joking around. And I will say, hey, can you guys draw how to line up for a face-off? Or can you set it up for me? You make them race against each other. You do it with the reds, you do it with the whites, so you can do it faster. You know, they're not watching NFL games usually. They're not watching the pro female games usually. So it's actually been really neat. There'll be times I'll come in the room and they're like throwing it at the board and like fighting each other with it. And then there's times they're actually doing the plays. But that's been a really fun thing. I made it. I don't sell them as people on Instagram asked me. They're not hard to make, but it has really worked extremely well with our youngest age groups. And I would venture to guess it would be just as effective with the older age that way. So that's one thing that you don't even, as a coach, you don't even necessarily have to do anything. You can just ask questions of them and say, hey, like who can draw our forecheck, or where do we stand on the penalty kill? You know, have them go move the magnets around. The other one that's been, you guys probably can't see this because it's backwards, but I have this like check mark system I do with teams. And I did this with my junior team forever, where we would set specific goals for each game based on what we worked on in practice. And I thought to myself, I'm going to do this with the U9 kids and just see what happens. So we had a tournament here and we had 4 games, you know, 2 games each day. There's no championship in U9. You just play 4 games and get a medal. That doesn't mean anything. And I've never seen these kids so focused. I mean, it works in junior because the girls are like, okay, we have a focus and we can win something if we get a lot of check marks, right? So if they got enough check marks, they won cupcakes, like good cupcakes, not like the cheap grocery ones, you know, good cupcakes. And they got like they were so focused. They knew what we were working on. You know, they were things that were realistic. So the check marks on this were 12 or more shots on net, 3 or less offsides. This was a tournament right after we taught them offside. And then 3 defensive hunts. So where you like chase someone down and steal the puck in our own end. And then they lost a point there if they gave up a breakaway. And we got every single check mark. And these girls were so fired up about it. And so we do it, you know, we didn't do it for a month. And then the girls were like, hey, can we do check marks again? And we did it in a game on the weekend. And all of a sudden we had our best game of the season. And so little things like that make a big difference. And I'm new to this age group in terms of coaching a team. I've taught skills at this age group forever. But the things that I'm doing with them, I'm not the head coach of the team. I'm spending as much time as I can on it, but like to Peter's point, I'm running around coaching a bunch of different teams, and I don't have an hour and a half before practice to do this stuff. And then the only other thing which I would recommend, like we put this together, it's a coaching book for all our teams. So it's got like game cards and it's got the check mark thing I just showed you. So every coach in our organization has that. But then I think I showed this before, Wally. It's got our mission, vision, and values for the organization on it. It's got somewhere for them to put that for themselves. It's got our whole Wildcat way to play that I created. And then it's got practice reminders like don't shoot too many pucks at the goalie's head. That's actually not in there, but it's probably a good one to have. But again, this took a lot of time to create, but I can go into a rink and I know every coach has this and I can ask them to show it to me and I can say, you know, what's on your game card or what check marks are you doing? And there's, you know, that sets a certain amount of accountability. It's culture, right? But it is also X's and O's. It's also tracking, okay, the last time we played Mississauga, what was the game like? Oh, here it is in my book. It's meeting people where they are and not expecting them to be full-time hockey people. So those are just 3 little things that I grabbed off my desk there that I would suggest, you know, make a big difference for all the levels. And again, we have an expectation from our U22 junior team all the way down to our U9B team and everywhere in between, all our 32 rep teams. You know, they don't all have the magnetic board, but I certainly expect that they have, you know, they're doing not the minimum. I don't like the word the minimum, but they're doing the minimum effective dose or the maximum effective thing in the minimal amount of time to get the best result possible. And that's how I've changed my coach development. Like, you know, Rick, I just sent you the email I sent out yesterday. You know, you can go down quite a rabbit hole on that email of all the videos I sent about goal scoring. Most coaches can't read through all of that or aren't going to. You know, if you send them one image about where to shoot in the net, you know, short side low or whatever it is, they're going to be able to absorb that. So that's always, and I think the players are the same way, right? 5 minutes here and there. I had a coach mentor years ago who told me he used to 5 minutes before they did the team meeting for the game. He had one coach take the forwards and one coach take the D for 5 minutes. And they could talk about anything, right? But if you think about it, that's 5 minutes before every game all season that's specific to your position. Like, that's gold, right? Because or else you're doing a 2-hour D-specific session. The Ds are like lost after 10 minutes. So anyways, just a few tricks of the trade. But yeah, I can send the game. If you guys want, I'll put the PDF for this in the chat. It's not just game cards, but I can share all of it with you if you want. I'll throw it up here in the attachments.
Kim, I just typed in what you've said is everybody has to discover the right amount, the right time, and the right way of doing things. We've got a wealth of knowledge, but sometimes we overload. Coaches often talk about what they know, and it isn't appropriate for the audience they're working with. And I think what Al has discovered, and you are rediscovering, is the effectiveness of the way to do things efficiently to get a result. I I just love the way it's going, Al. And before we get back to you, Al, I want Hal Turst to introduce himself. Hal's in Minnesota, and you can tell by the color of his hair, he's like you and I. And he'll introduce himself, and then I might have a leading question, if nobody else does, for Al to get going on this adventure of what I call doing things the right way. Go ahead, Al.
Hello. Pleased to meet you, Hal. You're Hal, are you?
Hey, Hal, yeah.
You
Nice
know,
to meet you.
we have a boy at Shattuck there. He's a prospect and boy from Newfoundland, and so we have a lot of kids that go in those directions, and it's so pleased to meet you. I just wanted to comment on one thing, Kim. I have a magnetic board with Montreal and Toronto as the little men that move around on it, and that is the best teaching tool, and it probably taught more than anything that I've ever had. And kids can, as you're saying, the kids can draw out the situations and everything, and ask them, well, is somebody else got another idea? And that for the elite kids, and they learn from it. They love it. You can't buy them anymore. I think, Tom, don't you have one with the magnetic men on it?
I think he's still driving.
Okay. All right. So anyway, that's the one. And Kim, your other ideas, I'd like to have copies of those things if you don't mind, because this is you guys are the teachers, and there's so much experience right here that and the good thing about it is none of us know it all. So, we all know a little bit, and by sharing it, it can become really good. The other thing I do that's different maybe is I don't use an X and O board on the ice. I talk to them, and I want them to paint word pictures in their mind, and so they pay attention better, and most of them get it, and there's always one kid that'll get it first, and then there's some that don't learn that way, so they go at the end of the line, and the kids help them. They have to go to 5 or 6 stations, and it's all movement. They're all moved together, and those kinds of things in our drills. So I've had more success not using a board, because sometimes they tune you out, because they see that in school a lot, and when they're more alert when they're painting word pictures in their minds.
Al, I'm just going to ask Hal to introduce himself now, and then we'll get back to you. And I've got a couple questions in mind. So, Hal Turst?
Yeah, thank you. I think I just finished my 51st year of coaching.
Wow.
Bantam Bees. Some of the folks on the call know that we've had I would like to call the first half of the season the worst half of season we've ever had, mostly off ice issues and some on ice. And the last month has been awesome. And since we last met last week, we've played 5 games. 4 of them went into overtime. 1 was double overtime. We lost last night 4-3 in overtime. And again, we're playing against programs. We have 300 kids in our program, and we're playing against teams where they have 1,000 kids in their programs. And we beat one of them the other night in overtime. We lost last night to one of the other ones. But I have actually never seen a team go from really poor to really good in the course of a season. And I standing on the bench last night watching them, execute everything we've been working on all season long, and it finally clicked about 3 weeks ago. And I was just awed. And the coaches from the other teams were awed. And I don't know, it's process, right? You got to believe in the process, and you got to do the right things and let the kids, you got to inspire them to believe that they are way better than they are, and they will go out and execute. So, this is Super Kim stuff. Where'd she go? Did she leave? Oh, she turned her camera off. Kim has got some really, really great stuff, and I'm going to now move in probably into a player development, which is really a coach development role in our organization. And I'm going to steal everything I can from the rest of you guys on this call. So And I have some ideas of my own, so. Okay, on we go, Wally.
Okay, Al. Al, have you got anything in particular that you want to stick handle with now? I've got eons of questions. The one thing, and I'll just bit of a promotional thing. Um, Al, you told me a story last night about Nathan McKinnon being one of your demonstrator.
Well,
Go ahead.
I'm not sure he was a demonstrator. Sydney was a demonstrator because Sydney spent 8 summers with us from the time he was about 5 or 6 till he was 14, and he'd come for a number of different weeks in the summer. He'd stay on site. Then we were at the old military base, and that was the time during when Cassie was with us and Brad Richards and all those guys, and Nathan always came for his skating, and his father said, that's what he liked most about it, and he was always a little small. I don't remember if he was a demonstrator or not, so he was always a great person. His father was wonderful, and come in after he was through with us, he came in one day just to revisit the place, and he's respectful and nice, and so was Nathan, very quiet, but he spent a number of years working on the skating, and as some that last presentation, Hal, is that sometimes what you're teaching comes to fruition later on, and obviously you taught them well when they're starting to have success now. There's a plateau in between there when they're absorbing all that stuff, and then all of a sudden it breaks forth, and you think, wow, it finally. And so thank you so much for that.
Yeah.
Al, I don't know if stick length is a big issue as much anymore. To me, getting started with a proper length stick, a shorter stick, is important. But with the flex in sticks, kids are using longer sticks and able to shoot much better with it. And there are a lot of players that handle pucks in tight spaces. I still go on your paper that Tim Bothwell has expanded and putting pictures of all the Hall of Fame players whose stick lengths are Adam's apple or lower. And Gretzky and Orr were 2 examples. The Sedin twins of top of the chest bone. And you talk about stick length. You talked yesterday about, gee, who's got long arms? And you compared McDavid to somebody. And I'm just scratched my head on stick length, and I just want you to talk about it a bit. Josh is working with the younger generation now. Those kids are still coming up, and I know you have the thesis article available for everybody to read and study, and it's in your classroom sessions about the importance of it. But I wonder if you would elaborate on that a little bit, and if anybody else can share any stories about their challenges with players who are hell-bent in their election to stay with the same length, and yet they'll keep losing the puck. Al, go ahead. Stick length.
Well, alignment is so important in skating, and skating is the most important aspect of hockey. And if you're out of line, if you if all of a sudden trying to handle the puck out front, then you're losing power in your stride. And again, it's not always the chin or below the chin or wherever it is, but no one shoots harder than Ovechkin. He's got a real short stick, or it's not a short stick, it's a stick to suit him. And Gretzky, Al McGinnis, the Hulls, Brad and Bobby had sticks the shoulder length, and they had pretty hard shots. I think Bobby was clocked at 118 miles an hour with a wooden stick. Well, people will disagree with that, but that's what I hear. And so if you've got a shorter stick, then you get a lower, like if it's get a 60 or 65 rather than using 100. So you get the same whip in it, and so there's got to be something to Gretzky and Howe and Bobby Orr and the great defensemen like was the great defenseman with the Oilers there, Wally?
Coffee?
Coffee, yeah. Coffee was one of the greatest skaters in hockey, and he had his stick was in the chest high, just a little above the V in your neck, or below the V in your neck. And so it's alignment. And if you're teaching kids to skate and not bend their knees, because in skating they have to have a 90-degree bend in their knees and a 45-degree lean for maximum speed carrying the puck. Otherwise, they're carrying it to the side, or they're using it with straight legs, and that's why I think that in a lot of cases the girls don't score as many goals as the guys, because but I see them they're getting them shorter now than there was. I watched a national midget championship here, and a few years, 3 or 4 years, or maybe more ago, and in the first period there was only one pass completed. Everything else was going under the stick or bouncing off their sticks or whatever, and it was just because their sticks were like eye high or over their head sometimes, and so it's not a stick, it's not a short stick, it's a stick that suits you, and that it relates to body posture and arm length, because you could be tall with the short arms or short with the long arms or whatever. So that has to be in, and that's explained pretty well, I think, in that even in those older things like Meeker had out, and so I mean that's parents said, well, you need sometimes they said, well, defensemen need a longer stick, and I said, why? Well, they said for poke checking. Well, I said, why don't you get one like another foot higher over your head, because you could really poke check then. And they say, well, that's too long. And so why it's too long, they don't have a very good answer, or have none. So I don't know. We have when I coach a team, they pass the puck, they skate well, they move the puck. Rick Vibe, I coached him, and he had he played. He was the first league to score 50 goals, and he had a stick that was around his shoulders, and he could shoot pretty good as well.
Al, I'm going to share with everybody and our extended audience the article that you wrote on stick length, and Tim Bothwell added pictures of all the Hall of Famers to validate it. And Samantha Holmes, who is a leader in girls hockey Calgary, she said this is a big challenge, but she said you can't argue with science. And I think that's the most important thing. Now, we've got some questions, but we'll go to, I'm not sure who was first, but we'll let Kim first, and then we'll get back to Hal. Go ahead, Kim.
Hi. I think the biggest challenge I face with it, and I have a ridiculously short stick when I coach, which is maybe forces me to bend my knees more than I want to these days. I have a 55 flex, and I would say it barely goes to my collarbone, and it's actually longer than the stick I played with. So when I look at pictures of me playing it is almost verging on making me look like I have a mini stick. But Wally probably doesn't remember how I played, but like I was all in tight along the wall, could score in the dirty areas. But if you asked me to take a wrist shot from, the blue line, it wasn't getting very far. But it was tailor-made to suit my game, right? So I probably started with a longer stick, and then eventually, started to whittle it down. I also was really low when I skated. But I'm finding that a challenge even with the youngest kids. Part of it is the parents, they have a son that plays, they played, and they don't necessarily want to listen to the importance of having a shorter stick, at least as it relates to skating and puck handling and passing, because quite honestly, at our level, like, none of them can really shoot anyway. So that argument goes like out the window. We have like 3 girls who can get a wrist shot off the ice. Okay. So the priority is being able to handle the puck, but it also is sometimes some of the administrators or people in our house league programs, our learning programs, who, grew up playing when sticks were a little longer or had a long stick themselves with a really big knob, and they are maybe getting first access to these players, right? So they are, a parent who knows nothing about hockey, a kid who's never played before, runs into some guy who's, quite a bit older than me, and he says, "Oh, of course it's got to be at your eyeballs," and of course those parents don't know any different, and they trust this person, right? And so then you're already trying to change mindsets very early. But I agree completely, Alan. I work with 12 different teams on a weekly basis here. That's separate from my skills camps. Everything from the top level teams in an organization to my daughter's team. And I would change the majority of the girls' sticks length. I would change the curve on almost all of them, because the passing accuracy for the level they should be able to do it at is so low, incredibly low, and they've never even thought about it, right? And we all know, well, it's a $450 stick. Well, yes, it's a $450 stick that, if you get it right, will make your daughter 25% better. Like, it's like instant gratification. Like, would you rather take her to power skating every week, or spend money? Like, this is sort of an easy fix, but it's a hard sell for most players and most parents. The 8-year-olds will do whatever I say, but they go to their mom and dad and say, "Kim says my stick's too long," and then the parent comes to me and says, "Why did you say that?" So I don't even know that the education of them works. I think they have to see it to believe it, and maybe it just takes like taking someone else's shorter stick at a practice. That's what I do at my total female hockey stuff. If I think there's a kid whose stick is way too long, I just give her someone else's stick that's shorter and make her do a couple drills like that, even though it might be the wrong curve or whatever it is, and they almost instantly are better. And then that's the buy-in. They have to actually try it, and then they're sold. But you've all watched enough girls hockey. There's not a lot of boomers going bar down from the point. So having the longer stick argument doesn't quite hold much water at the levels we're playing at over here.
Yeah, Kim, and Hal, I believe, and we're talking about the leadership component of coach education. All those coaches have to get certified. So I'm saying at Coach 1, the routine compulsory activity is the coach going into the dressing room with first-time parents and first-time players explaining a proper stick length. Now that can be done because it's done by the sports governing body in a certification course. When you get those 6, 7, 8-year-olds being told by the coach what a proper stick length is, and they start that way and ask the parents to become the stick length and stick grip doctors for their child playing hockey, I think that's the way to make a bigger change. I've done the buy sticks shorter and let them play small area games with them. But to get to the masses, Al, and you get to the largest mass in the world that you can, I want to get to the entire hockey mass, and that's every coach that has to take a course, that has to teach what they learned from that course. And so that's my solution to the problem. Hal, go ahead, and then we'll go to Peter.
Thank you, Kim. That you're right on. We mostly coach, juniors in high school hockey, and I've noticed actually that the manufacturers are consistently making the sticks longer, and the rules have changed in the National Hockey League because there used to be a stick length limit, and they raised it a few years ago. Partly, I think, because the players keep getting so much bigger. But I've also had a heck of a time getting kids to play with a shorter stick, especially defensemen. And I've had some good defensemen, but they can't handle the puck when it's down close in their feet. And because the stick's just too damn long. But the younger kids, the Bantam age, whatever, you're right, they can't catch pucks because they reach out. And then, the whole biomechanics is wrong. And I also think the defensemen like the long stick, so they don't have to engage the opponent up close and personal. They can poke it, but then when they poke it, they're still a long ways from it. And youth players, even a lot of high school players, don't have a lot of strength in their arms. And to try to handle a puck that's out 5 or 6 feet away from them with one hand, I think it's a challenge. So this is a great topic, Wally. I'm not going to speak for USA Hockey, but my guess is they aren't going to do this. I think this has to be done at a local level. All politics are local, not national. And we can educate, guys like Tim Taylor to make it happen in his community. If I can make it happen in our community, we can start a revolution, sort of one program at a time, and promote it. I will work with Minnesota Hockey to try to perhaps get them to put a little emphasis on it with their massive email campaigns that are going on constantly. So thanks for bringing that up. It's a great topic.
Peter.
Yeah, I just have a quick little fun story from years ago when I was coaching youth hockey. I was coaching, it was squirts, and there was a boy that was a defenseman. And, it was one of those situations where his elbow had to be up here in order for him to get his blade down on the ice. So I just mentioned to him that, you got to talk to your dad, you've got to cut this stick. Came back the next practice, and it was exactly the same. I said, did you talk to your dad? And he said, yes. My dad said, I paid $200 for that stick. I'm not cutting anything.
Peter.
So we had to talk about, then we talked about, you can put this little thing called a butt end as he grows, but chances are by the time you get to the end of the season, he's going to break the stick anyway. So but that's just a fun little story.
Peter, the first hockey school I ever ran many years ago, I had a power saw on the bench, had the players lined up, marked it where it should be. They stood there in the skates. I got a phone call from an irate dad that night. I think it was a $7 stick. He commented on the $7 stick and where he was going to shove it. And I had to write, as a result of that, in my acceptance, they all apply to the hockey school, and you reply in a formal letter back in the day. And I provided a 1-pager on stick length theory. Deeper knee bend, better handling of the puck, learning to skate and puck control precedes shooting, which might benefit you, but it all around makes you a better player. But I never sawed them off like that again. We just had to sell them, convince them, but that little piece of paper getting in their hands had a pretty good impact on the audience that was attending. So go ahead, Kim, and then we'll try to get back to Al. And Al, there's a million things and directions you can go. So go ahead, Kim.
Wally, I just wanted to say, I guess you can still do that. We had a coach last year. I ran all his skills. He was a B-level coach. Every single player on his team, they were all minors in B, and every single one made A or double B the following year. And they're all like so he ran like a very, very robust program for a B team. And I came in one day and I said, I ran his practices once or twice a week. I said, oh, their sticks are too long. He's like, okay, we'll fix it next practice. And he brought a saw out. And I thought he was joking. And he's like, well, how long should this stick be? And I was like, this long. And he just cut it. And the girls were like 13 years old. They're like, he cut everybody's stick. I mean, it worked. Like, they were a very good team. It didn't make them any worse. They did extremely well. But I was like, oh, didn't think you could do that in 2022, but good for you. The only kid's stick he didn't cut was a goalie's, but almost, I would say out of the 15 skaters, we probably cut 10 sticks, and some of them like considerably. I didn't take any heat for that. I'm not sure if he did, but anyways, their team was really good, so I think he had a little more leeway to be able to do stuff like that.
Tim.
Yeah, it was more than just several years ago, but we were playing a game and the team, we were either squirts or maybe it was mites, but we were playing in a tournament and we played a team where every kid on the other team had the exact same stick. And the story behind that was the the coach was adamant about stick length and he wasn't going to win the battle with the parents. So his solution was he it was a very low end model Bauer. It might even been a wood stick at that time, but it wasn't a very expensive stick for the kids at that point in time. So I don't know if he ponied up the money or he just convinced the parents to chip in 35 or 40 bucks, whatever that cheap stick cost. But every kid on the team had the same stick, and it was the correct or reasonable length. So I thought that was interesting. I got to jump off for a work call. Al, it's been great to be a part of this. I'll catch the rest of it on Wally's video.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Al, what's going through that wonderful mind of yours?
Well, I mean, the other thing is, Josh is more like what I used to do. We cut Sidney Crosby's stick when he was 5 or 6 or 7, whatever, when he came first, and he's never gone back to a long stick. Denny Malkin, you refer to the stars, but you also look at the scoring. And Josh says with the shorter stick, you can score more, and so they listen on that regard, because if they take a slap shot and their stick is too long, they're going to hit. They're going to not eat. One or two things are going to happen. They're not going to have a knee bend where they need power, because power is generated from the bottom up. And other than that, they're going to hit the heel of the stick. It's not going to. They're not going to be able to shoot properly, because if they do a slap shot and their knees aren't bent properly, they can't one time it. And one timing is like what 60% of goals are scored in one timers, and so that's an argument to use. But the guys like what's the big defenseman that was with Chicago, and then he went to Washington, and now he's back in school. Duncan Keefe, and his stick was really, he had a pretty good shot, and his stick was really suitable to him. It wasn't too long, and they say, well, Shara has a long stick. It's only the only reason his stick is long is because he's long, but it is like below his chin, and so maybe that'll put an end. What I do is I used to do. I'm not so involved anymore, but I tell the parents if they were reluctant to cut it, because we tell them on Sunday, or when they come first, then we show them videos and stuff, and I say, well, tell you what, by Friday, if he doesn't like it better, then I'll buy him a new stick. And I only had to buy one stick over all those years, and that guy went to basketball, and so it was it was always, because they come to me on Friday and say, well, you're right, he loves the stick. But then they go back to their home coaches and they make them play with longer sticks again. I had a boy went to Notre Dame, Newfoundland. He was projected to be he was on the New Brunswick Canada Games team a few years ago, and he came back to play in the big tournament in Moncton, and I couldn't believe him. He couldn't skate. He couldn't pass the puck. He couldn't anything, and he got cut from the team. And so he said, "What am I going to do?" I said, "Cut it the way it was." So he cut it the way it was, and he went to the first practice. And after the practice, the coach came over and said, "Well," he said, "now you're playing like you did when you came here. You're shooting the puck better. You're carrying the puck better. You're skating better." And he didn't really know that he had cut the stick back the way it was initially, but that young fellow caused him to quit hockey eventually. But that's the argument, because people still say, well, you need a long stick, and there's no rationale for it. Like a golfer is not going to use a club too long for him. A baseball player is not going to use a bat that doesn't suit him, and the same thing should happen with hockey. Anyway, I don't know, Wally. I may be running out of steam here. I'm still recovering, so I'll stay on for a bit, and if I go, I really appreciate the fact that I was on again. And
Have you got your fruit juice beside you?
well, I've got my monitor here to tell me where my glucose is, and
Okay.
and sometimes I'm anyway, I'm getting better every day, and that's
Okay.
just it's a gift. Every day is a gift.
Rick, I wanted to ask you, you've been there and done that, like Al and all of us. Um, Stick length, was it ever an issue for you, or did you just let it go, or how did you deal with it?
Pretty much the same experience has already been related, Wally. You make your argument and you live with the end result. Had some that came around, and others, for the most part, were more concerned about, having that stick have longevity, or had their own bias, let's put it that way, as to how things should be. And it's personal property. And yeah, I've been guilty of taking a saw and getting the negative feedback for it, same as a couple have related here. So the amazing thing is that the group that we have here, we're still discussing something as fundamental as the proper equipment for the player. That's an argument that's been going on for decades.
Well, that's why I say, and I know Hal alluded to the fact that the governing bodies will never do that. To me, they don't care much about Coach 1 and Coach 2. They do. They've got the curriculum. They care more about, winning gold medals at the World Juniors. And I think at Coach 1 and Coach 2, which is half ice to whole ice hockey transition, and learn to skate and learn to play programs, those parents and players, they'll do whatever they're told by their coach. And I believe that telling coaches what to do is very important when it comes to cardinal issues behaviorally and technically. And stick length is one of those issues. Now, I'm the same as all of you. Struggled with it, trying to convince Girls Hockey Calgary to go to bat with it and walk the talk going up the ladder. I'm watching U13 teams that Tom coaches and West coaches, and I only see 3 or 4 players with sticks that are too long. But hell, I'm going to mention this to you. These are U13 girls. They're considered AA girls, so they're playing Division III boys league, and the puck slows them down. They can't breakaway skate. So I'm trying to convince the coaches to see if they use one hand on the stick and push the puck ahead, forehand and backhand, as they race down the ice. Do they get their knees bent? Do they get the puck ahead of them so they're off balance skating forwards? Now, this is so automatic to me. It's the starting point because you can get breakaways with the puck if you can skate fast with it, and the best players usually are faster with the puck than without it. So it's still an issue, and I know my personal story. I've told it many times. I went to Chicago's camp, was going to quit after the first day, apologized to Tommy Ivan about inviting me. The pace was too quick. I cut 4 inches off my stick. I survived the camp, and I made the national team the following year, and I stayed with that stick length, even though the longer one allowed him to be in the top 3 scoring in the CIS. So every level that a kid goes up to try out, whether you go from midget to junior A or major junior, I just advocate, if you want to be quicker at that pace, cut the stick off, because it's going to be so much faster. And that's simple. It's something I lived, so I believe in it to the point where people might regard it as being anal about it, but it's that important. Paul, go ahead.
Wally, you're too dang funny. I love it. If I could just change the topic for a minute. In USA Hockey, at Bantams and below, they don't allow icing the puck when you're shorthanded. and they've eliminated tag up offside. As a result of all of this, I mean, think about the no icing. You're already a man short, and now you aren't allowed to ice the puck, which means you have to shorthanded. You've got to manage to get it out to the red line before you can get a little breathing room and shoot the puck down. It also takes away from a coach all of the strategic teaching about how to forecheck shorthanded, how to play man up when you're regrouping in the back end, and so nobody does that, and yet all these kids are going to go in with a whole new set of rules next year out of Bantams, and the tag up offsides is the result of that. There's probably twice as many face-offs as there were before. And again, the result of all of this is many of our youth games do not end up in the allotted amount of time on the penalty, on the clock, game clock. It's the wall clock because they're out of time. Because referees have the puck all the time. Refs hate it, coaches hate it. In our game the other night, the president of our local district came to the game. I've known him for a long time. I said hello to him. I haven't seen him in 15 years probably. And I pointed this out to him and I said, Minnesota used to lead USA Hockey and now we're following them, but we have made exceptions to rules. And I think these rules we need to revert back to the old rules. And much to my surprise, he said to me, I haven't seen a Bantam game for a couple of years. And I agree 100% with you. And I'm going to try to push this up and see if we can get this changed. But think about how constricting those rules are. In a couple of our games recently, which were, really close, in our last 6 games, I think 5 of them were overtime OT games. And shorthanded, the other teams, what did they do? Every time they got it, they just iced it. 7, 8, 9 times when they were shorthanded. So unintended consequence of maybe somebody thought that this was going to teach the kids to handle the puck better. It didn't work very well. So I don't know. What do you guys do in Canada? Are you still playing on the old rules?
Rick,
Yeah.
can you comment on that topic?
Are you talking to me?
Yeah, Rick.
Oh, Rick, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
To answer Hal's question, yeah, we're still playing by the old rules. I'm one actually. I have my own personal feeling on penalties is that you penalize the team and then you give them an easy out, which is the icing. And I go back to the old time hockey back in the 50s and 60s when I was a kid. And there was a time when they had specialty penalty killers as part of the roster. Montreal Canadiens had Phil Goyette and Claude Provo. To name a couple, their specialty was ragging the puck, playing keep away.
Yep.
They weren't allowed to ice.
Huh.
And that brought the face-off back in the zone, which has its own competitive disadvantage. So there's good reason to maintain possession and maintain control. But then historically, the Canadiens' power play was so good that they had to give everybody else a break. They did the same thing with the Oilers up here when in the 80s when they were so powerful 4-on-4. They took the 4-on-4 out of the game for the most part. So yeah, we're still playing by the old rules. I'd like to see something like what you're doing there, but you can't do it at one level and have that not be the training ground for the next level. It's got to be across the board.
No, I agree 100%. And I think at Pee Wee's on down, it's fine. Bantams that are moving up next year are it's a problem. By the way, we scored 9 shorthanded goals this year, so we weren't passive penalty killing for sure. But some coaches will just gang up on the puck. They'll send 3 guys after the puck, knowing that your guy they can't ice it, and so you're almost double penalized. I agree with you that encouraging them to not just ice it, but pass it around and maybe icing it as the last resort, and then go like crazy and see what you can do in the other half of the ice while you're shorthanded. So anyways, thanks. I just didn't know what your rules were up in Canada. So
one further comment on that is they could apply the no change rule the same as they do.
Yeah.
Then you're not going to want to ice it too frequently, killing a penalty, because you're going to have 4 stranded players out there exhausted.
Yeah.
So there is some mitigation to that, but again, I prefer to see it across the board. All the kids coming through are playing by the same rules, so that they can grow the game progressively rather than have to make knee-jerk adjustments or quantum leap adjustments as they move up the scale.
Well, we also don't have body checking in peewees or squirts, and then these kids come into Bantams. In the first year, they're scared to death, and rightly so. And it takes them.
Get me started on that one.
Yeah, we get. I think we had 5 first-year kids this year. One a girl, and she actually made the transition faster than the boys did. And I would argue that a couple of the boys still haven't made the transition because, they're not physically. I mean, they just don't want to compete physically, and they've never been taught how. We spent a lot of time with it this year.
That's a big issue.
It's a week. Working on body contact drills, pinning rather than slamming. Got a lot of compliments from refs about not unnecessary body contact. But I know that probably 99% of the teams in Minnesota at the Pee Wee level, Bantam level, they don't talk about it at all. So anyways.
Al, I'm going to ask you for your thoughts on that. The what we've been talking about in terms of changes and anything else. You've coached whole ice hockey at novice. You still do, believe in the spring programs. But what's the thoughts out there?
On face-offs and all that stuff?
Yeah, the initial thesis that Hell wanted to change.
Everyone copies the Quebec Major League, and the Quebec Major League copies the NHL. So there's really no controversy about it at all. And I know I didn't like the center ice line when I coached high school, and they so we did it without the center ice, and because they did that in the States, and we were against Culver down in Boston, but the kids like that. There's more freedom to skate, and now there's so little room. There's so little room anywhere on the ice. They're so fast and everything. So I don't know. I don't know about changes. I haven't given it much thought, but I'd like to finish, Wally, with the one thing that I when I take a team, I start them at novice and I stay with them until they're bantam. So I only get, every 3 or 4 years I get a new team, but I'm not sure. I may be finished now coaching, but I'm hoping that, I can advise and help kids in other ways. But I think that one thing that has to be started really young is accountability, because if there's no accountability, there's no learning. And not the 2 main things on accountability, of course, is their language and their behavior. But on ice is staying on too long and not passing the puck. And so the only rules we have, and we're upfront with the parents, is that if they stay on longer than 40 seconds, they're going to have to sit a shift because they're stealing somebody else's ice time. And so and also they're training their bodies that way to be a high performance skater, because their energy systems have to be trained to play hard when they're out there. And anyone that's on more than 40 seconds, their performance goes down and they look slow. And so if you come at it with that, so if a coach comes in and you're on too long, you thought you were fast, but now you're looking slow. But the bottom line is they sit out. And now after you've had them for a year, they sit out on their own. They know they're on too long, and they know why. And it makes their teammates mad at them too, because somebody's losing the shift. And the other thing is not moving the puck. If you don't move the puck, if they don't move the puck, then you're going to sit. And I benched Rick 5 when he was a peewee, and he invited me to his wedding, so he didn't hold it against me. And I think they understand. I think they understand that and I tell them the reason I'm doing this, guys, is it's for your future. It's not it's but for your future, because you want to be a high level player, you got to get out there and go full speed for 30 seconds, 40 seconds, and a great model for that is Sidney Crosby. The worst model is McDavid, and and he's stealing somebody else's ice time, and it's hard to have team spirit when that happens. But Crosby got 30 seconds, and the average shift length in the Olympics was 22 seconds, and his line was 28 seconds. And so those things are really important in development, and two of the most important. And you got to start them young, and you tell parents up front this is what's going to happen, and they're not surprised. And if they don't like it, then they can find another program. That's the way I put it. Because if you want to play with it, these are our rules, and it's for the good of the kids. And if you don't believe that, then it's better you join another program.
I wonder if you can do that in community hockey or AA hockey, because somebody is going to question that and challenge that theory. The coach may not be supported on that. Al, what you're saying, it's the demise of hockey, minor hockey today. I watch AAA midget hockey a lot with a friend whose son's playing, and the first thing I noticed is a behavioral coaching is not dealt with. A kid stays out too long, he's not even talked to. It disrupts the shifts. The other kids get upset, and I know because this father who I coach is telling me about it. The other rule that Al, I took it from you. You said move the puck. I call it headman, because headman, the guy's obviously open ahead of you. And I think that's sort of a see the ice, he's there, obviously pass it. And this is happening. And then bad penalties, reaction penalties. After scoring a big goal to go ahead, the player who scored went by the other team's bench and mimicked them. And the coach didn't address it. They ended up losing the game because of that lack of respect and behavior. It's all about a lack of emotional control to do the things the right way. So it's the issue. It's ruining the game. Coaches are shortening the bench, double shifting the best players, letting them get away with things that are cardinal, things that need to be dealt with in a consistent fashion.
Well, minor hockey should be always coached with the future of the child in mind. And the problem you're dealing with is winning is put first, and that's hard in the game. And I've had many experience with that the parents or some other coach said, well, you penalized him, he was scared to come off the ice, he was scared to stay on the ice to back check. Well, fact is, most of the time they get no strength left. They've depleted their energy out there, and so I penalize that. If they're in their own end and they don't come off in time, then they sit, because they have to learn those skills if they're going to move on. And I have no problem with talking to parents about that. But I'm going to, what's the best? To penalize a child for doing something wrong that will be detrimental in his future? Because everybody now are saying, get on and off quick, get on and off quick, get on and off quick. And any good coaches are saying that. And but you can say it till the cows come home, but if there's no consequence, then there's no change, and there has to be a consequence. And in life there has to be a consequence, and these things should carry over to life. If you do something to break the rules, then somebody's going to suffer for it. And so if you're teaching to develop the child in mind and look at his future not only on the ice but off the ice, and for his dream and his dream after the dream, they have to have all those skills in their mind. And so that's, I guess that's the way I've been, and that's the way our program is, and hopefully that's made a difference. But nothing's perfect.
Rick, go ahead, Rick.
I just want to support what Al's saying there. I like the accountability piece where you explain this up front and you give them the option in or out. If you can live with this kind of structure, you're in, and if you can't, you better find another program. Wally, well, that's the way I've run mine. And just getting that upfront agreement, getting everything on the table is a key to having a successful or more successful season than you might well have had otherwise, with a lot of controversy and a lot of conflict.
I want to thank you guys. Like, you may not think your work's important, but what you're doing, you're making a difference. And don't stop doing what you're doing. And I hope you're back on regular soon. But thanks so much for having me, Wally. And it's so nice to meet you new guys there. And good luck with everything you do. And God bless.
Take care, Al.
Okay, well,
Well, guys, I'm sure glad we got Al on. You can see that he epitomizes the good of the game. And he's there for the right reason. He does things the right way. And he hasn't been doing it yesterday. He's doing it. This is his 45th year. As an educator, he learned in teaching elementary school. He didn't talk about this, but he just learned everything about respecting young people. And I'm going to share a story with you, and it is related indirectly. I went to the Canucks Junior A banquet and sat at one of three tables, which was all former players. And one of the parents who I had coached actually purchased three tables and invited former players. And I attended along with Don Phelps, who coached that team for 28 years. I coached it for one, but we earned a lot of respect from those players, and the satisfaction of meeting them and the authentic smiles and thank yous on their faces. That was the biggest paycheck you could ever ask for. And it was just an amazing evening. And one of the players is principal of a high school now. He coached midget AA. His name is Tony Dawson. Started in elementary school, went to junior high, became an administrator. Now he's principal of St. Mary's High School. And he was telling his story as an elementary school teacher, interviewing parents. And he interviewed these two parents. And when he was done, he said, all I wanted to do was give the kid a hug because of the state of mind of the parents. And that's what some of those young people may be facing that we don't even know about. So I think you get to know your kids. You can pick and select them. Sometimes you can't. And coaching is becoming, really, parents don't have time to parent. The coach is going to spend more time with their kids than they are. You think about that. It's usually reality. And if the time spent is complaining on the drive to and from the rink or encouraging on the drive to and from the rink. And I think what we're trying to do is make everything everybody does encouraging. So, Hal?
Yeah, you're right on, Wally, just in real time. And again, I started coaching this team. I didn't know any of the kids and I didn't know any of the parents. And as the season went on, and we talked a little bit about some of the problems that we had with a parent and one of the players, but I also learned in the last month that we've got three kids on the team. These are 13 and 14-year-old kids whose parents are going through a brutal divorce. And these kids are so vulnerable. And he pulled here, there. One of our kids is finally getting time he hasn't had any time with him for quite a while. And, you know, one of the boys who got hurt was our sort of our weakest player and got hurt by another player in practice. I asked him last night at the game, what'd you do today? And he goes, well, I was with my dad. We're out looking for a new house. Yeah, because his father and mother are getting divorced, and it's very contentious. So I really feel for these kids. They have a lot of challenges in their lives. And to your point, Wally, you know, the better we get to know them and their families, the better job we can do as a coach. That's, you know, it's hard. I've always said when I in coaching clinics, the role of the coach, I said, well, however much time you've been spending coaching your team, double it if you want to do it right. Spend more time learning, getting to know the families, getting to know the kids. It'll be a much more meaningful activity as a coach, and you'll have much greater impact on the kids going forward. So thanks for bringing that up, Wally. That's awesome.
I'm just wondering if anybody else has anything to share in that regard, because it's really the culture that we create in something we control, which is our team and our environment. Has anybody got anything else to add to this discussion? Peter?
Yeah, actually, I do. I'm not going to get this exactly right, so it's going to be sort of paraphrased, I think, by Maya Angelou, is people will often not remember what you did, but will always remember how you made them feel. So, right, to everyone's point.
Yeah, pretty close. I like it. It's awesome.
There you go.
Absolutely. Well, that goes back to the Positive Coaching Alliance, right?
Yeah.
Making kids feel safe, emphasize the positives and downplay the negatives, because every player makes mistakes on an ongoing basis on the ice. And have you ever noticed that when you get scored on, everybody wants to say who was to blame, but when you score a goal, everybody says we were fantastic. So it's you know, lots of mistakes made in every shift. If you look at video, you can point out lots of bad stuff. But you know, in the stock picking business, if you win 50% of the time, you make a lot of money. And you know, what are the stats on forward passes versus backwards passes? Like 20 or 25% of forward passes are successful. 80% backwards passes are successful. So like your regrouping passes and that kind of stuff. And so, you know, failure is part of this game, and learning to live with it, which is why hockey players do so well in life after they get done playing hockey, because they become so resilient. They learn to fail and get right back up and go out and do it again until they get it right. And so this is the greatest game on earth, honestly. So,
Peter.
Yeah, one of the other things too is, and kind of talking about coaching and get to know the players and that too. One of the things that's always been a pet peeve of mine is when a player comes to the bench and the coach says, you can't do that. You can't make that play. I mean, you pretty much, if the play didn't work, the kid knows that they shouldn't have made that play. But you never, I'm not going to say that, but rarely do you hear, and what I'd love more for coaches to approach it with is, so on that play there, tell me what you saw. What were you thinking? Exactly. That's what you can teach, right? You can get in the kid's head a little bit. Well, I thought this, and you know, very often it's something simple like, you know what, we're going to talk about seeing through the layers. You didn't really see through the layers. Let me explain to you what that is. You weren't necessarily wrong by what you saw, but you didn't quite see everything. So using it as a teaching moment as opposed to, especially at the college level, right? No kid wants to hear, you can't make that play. I'm pretty sure I know I can't make that play. Thank you. Right? So using it more as a teaching method and getting in their head a little bit at all levels kind of spirals back, I think, a little bit to what Al was saying about the kids are smarter than we think.
Oh, yeah. I agree 100%. I mean, I got even a couple of my kids this year, and more so in high school before, they'd make a really bad play. They'd come over to the bench, they'd sit down, they'd look at me and they go, I know. Yeah. I mean, they know. They're not stupid. And they don't need to be beat on every time they come to the bench.
Yeah, that's just
my
more...
coaches might say, we let them play. I mean, we'll address it when we get back to practice, and they make the same stupid play over and over again, then we got to have a conversation and suggest an alternate strategy.
Yeah, and that's more the coach's defense mechanism of their frustration, right? Which in and of itself is a negative thing because the team is going to react to how you coach in so many ways, right? You lose your mind over a penalty, all of a sudden for the next 3 shifts, that's the only thing all those kids are thinking about, how that wasn't fair or this or that or the non-call, that kind of thing. So just...
No, I 100%. And I always say, you stand there behind all those kids and you bitch at the refs and you criticize, them, and all you're doing is giving your team an excuse.
Right. I mean, what I would always do, even at the college level, when it was something that I knew was kind of blatant and everybody kind of on the bench knew it was blatant, always try to ask the referee to come over and say, listen, I want to make myself and my team better. Tell me what you saw because we didn't see that. And that was always, for me, it was always a great way to engage the referee, right? Because we've all been in situations where if you lose your mind with an official, all of a sudden they don't want to talk to you, and you're not getting anywhere. So I always took that approach, was tell me what you saw because I want to be better. I want my guys to be better. What did you see that we didn't see?
Yeah, that's awesome.
Peter, that's what I call.
We had 2 just snow last night, so I have to go back out and fire up my snowblower again. You guys, this is so awesome. We'll see you next week.
Okay.
Keep the faith.
Okay. Peter, I just wanted to comment on that strategy of bringing them to the bench and asking a question politely. I call that coaching in the future. In other words, coaches, like players, we tell players to stay in the moment. Well, coaches have to be in the future. If you react to the moment and respond to the moment about the referee's call, it's rubbing off on the players. So what you did is coaching in the future. You're obviously know how you respond, behave, act is going to affect the players. And that's a great way of dealing with it. The thing that bothers, and I do a survey at every coaching clinic, and I asked coaches to write down what bothers them the most, and it is referees.
Sure.
And it distracts them from coaching. And so they have to sort of get above that and realize that they're coaching. They can't be caught up with that. And I'm going to tell you a story about the 2002 Olympics. We got eight penalties against the United States in the first period. And the poor young female official refereeing in front of that crowd, we had talked about it months before, about what are going to be the challenges that we're going to anticipate. We knew that refereeing might not be perfect. It's part of the reality. You got to stay in the moment. So the kids, we ended up winning the game, and I'm telling you this story. It's hilarious. We win the game by 1 goal. They're celebrating over the bench. I'm picking up water bottles and papers, and Pat Quinn and the men's staff is coming down the hallway, the aisleway to the bench. And Pat, he looked like a bull in a china shop. He was coming right at me. He said, "How could you? How could you?" "How could I what, Pat? What's wrong?" He said, "Well, the ref tried to stiff you." I said, "Pat, you got a game in 2 days, gold medal game in 2 days." I says, "I did our job. That's what you got to do." It's amazing at that level that they get caught up there. And it was bad refereeing, but our ability as a staff, having talked about the scenarios that might occur, did occur, we handle it. The outcome speaks for itself. The player's outcome speak for itself. But there was some proactive desensitization of problems that might come up at the Olympics. This is a routine of every Olympic team. They go through every imaginable scenario, and they're prepared to deal with it and refocus, stay focused in the moment to perform well. So it's a great example, especially at elite athletics. And one other thing that came up at this Canucks banquet, talking about the influence of coaches, was my God, I've lost my train of thought on it. I might think of it again, but at that banquet, some of the players who are, parents now, who coach their kids are playing midget and junior hockey, they talked about, as players, some of those kinds of moments. And having coached them and shown that kind of discipline on the bench, and I don't know why, it's just that it wasn't in my nature to overreact towards officials particularly. But the players really, really appreciated it. And of course, those players at the table had the fortune of being coached by Don Phelps to a national championship, or being coached by me to a national championship. And it wasn't the coaching. It may have been the behavioral coaching. The X's and O's, no, but it was a disciplined, committed, trustful, respectful team, and that trust and respect came from the top down. So
Well, sure. Well, and you're always telling your players, right? Stay focused, task at hand, don't get too high, don't get too low. Then they look at you and you're throwing water bottles at an official, or throwing a whole pile of sticks out on the ice, right? Like, where's your credibility at that point? Right? I mean, it's a heated game, and things can kind of erupt, and I get that. And actually, one of the things, we have a local basketball program that's very good, and the teams are typically nationally ranked, and they were losing, and was close enough though. It was about a 4 or 5 point game, and the coach just absolutely lost his mind on the officials, got a technical. Now it's a 7 point game that they were never able to recover from. And to his credit, in the media and to the players, he apologized for losing his cool and how he may have affected the outcome due to that. So there's so much responsibility you have when you're on that bench, as far as, it's kind of, I always look at it like you're trying to be like the head of a household, right? If you start complaining about the bills and how you don't have enough to pay and this and that, that doesn't get you anywhere. But if you go get a second job, or you go to work, or you find solutions, people are going to want to follow you, right? So that's your job as a coach, is you need to find solutions and put yourself in a position where your players will follow you, will understand that you have their best interest at heart, And again, these are young people that you're, even at the college level, way younger than me. You're trying to teach them something.
Rick, I'm going to ask you a question. In your mentorship role, have you encountered behavioral coaching problems that you've had to address? And if you did, how did you address them?
Just this year, I had one U15 coach who had quite a strong bias against officials. And we've just talked about it, and I've explained to him a lot of what we're saying here, that you've got to set the positive role. You're not going to win that argument anyways. You need to know that. You do know it. You just need to act on it and lead your kids. And over the course of the season, he's learned to tone it down. He's learned to stay quiet. But it's for me, it was just a matter of explaining to him my experiences with officials and you know, the general knowledge that you can't win that argument. You can't lead your kids that way. If you're going to do it, then they're going to do it, and it just snowballs in all the wrong direction. That's what I've got for you on that, Wally.
Well, that's good. Like every one of us that are on board here, and that I don't even know if Tom's on still, or
Looks like he is.
We are, you know, I don't think we ever had to deal with ourselves in that kind of a problem. Maybe we did learning to coach, but behaviorally, I just sort of, the way I was raised was with respect and values. And so as a result, I coach that way. And I don't encounter coaches yelling at players much anymore at all. I haven't seen it. And yelling with a tone of voice that might be negative and derogatory, demeaning and de-energizing. So, but I know that working with Tom and his behavioral side, he's an artist at getting the right people out of the right time, and he doesn't shorten the bench. He manages it, and that's an art. And I've never seen him get upset, and maybe because we're never upset, he's never upset. It's just his behavior sort of carries through with the players, and they play consistently. May not win, but they're not shooting themselves in the foot by the way they're coached and by the way they play, by the way they behave. So the biggest thing I face at AA and AAA hockey, Rick, is behavioral coaching matters the most. It's like Allan said, you have to deal with things on the inside, self-awareness, influencing the introspection of who you are, what you're doing, how you're doing it, and being able to adapt and make a change that's going to make a difference. And it's hard to start now, but if you take them at U9 and you're providing that parenting, raising those young players the right way to respect values, work ethic, the importance of learning, and what Al's doing, to me, at that age, and Peter, you recognize it because he's in control. He's got a staff of 100 people in the summers, and he might have 15 spring hockey teams that have all been through the programs, coached by kids who are now parents that have all been through the programs. And they do this. Maybe not as well as he does, but they understand and emulate the culture that he wants to be emulated. And I think it's something to model, something to strive for. And I call it the good of the game, and El's doing it and living it. So I've wanted to get him on for a while. Last night we talked for an hour, and I recorded it. Today I recorded his hour and a half presence here, and it's precious stuff that I think is more important now because today's child is so far ahead of us in terms of the technological access to information. And I believe they're ahead of us, and they are really going to teach us more than we're going to teach them if we approach it the right way. So, Tom, are you home yet, or he had to drive his daughter to a session? So, anyway, guys, it's been a great morning, and I'm glad you were able to get on. Thank you very much, and I'm going to try to get Mike Benelli. He had a guest that he wanted to get on next week, and if we get Al on again, I might narrow it down to a couple topics where he can talk about and explain it. I'd like to get his son on because he's running the business now. He's today's guy. There's nobody here that, except Tom, still coaching, but there's a generation of coaches, and Josh, Al Andrews' son, is looking after the company. And I'd sure love to have him on to talk about what he's learned from his father, what he's carrying over with the business, and the challenges of moving forward today as a person who's involved in things.
That's great, because that question that you sort of just alluded to is wonderful, because you've got the difference in the generations, right? There's a point I feel like in today's world, and I guess it's always been this way, where you get to a point where you get smarter because of your age, but then you also get to a point where a certain group may think you're irrelevant because of your age. So for him to be in that wheelhouse, because I'm guessing he's 30s or 40s years of age, somewhere in there, by him just getting on, by him just getting on and saying, hey, this worked then and it still works, I think could be great. I think that could be great to, if nothing else, support the fact that despite your physical appearance, your brain may still work.
Yeah, that was obvious with Al. Like his articulation, like Al, like myself, and I'm sure many of us, I don't notice it with you, any of you, but his memory, he says, is failing him at times. But the one thing that I don't forget much is hockey stuff. And after my heart attack and memory loss and neurological rehab, the hockey stuff is one of the best things that I do recall and remember more often than not. And just having the session and you guys on, it's just keeping us going. So all the best and have a good weekend, both of you.
You do the same. Thank you. Enjoy the day, fellas.
See you next week.
Take care.